So another set of string methods can actually transform strings. So the first set of string methods that we were looking at were return something. And you might think that transforming strings, that sounds like a do something, right? Sounds like we're going to do something to a string. But what these actually do, they don't act on the string itself. They return a copy of the string that's transformed. So just keep that in mind. So if I'm going to use some of these string methods, and again, we're using dot notation with str as the string variable. So str.upper, a lot of these match up pretty well with some of the test string methods that we just looked at. str.upper changes everything to uppercase in the string. If there are non-alpha characters in the string, it just ignores them. Okay, so it'll return the same string with every alpha character uppercase. Same with lower. Strip is one that you need to use. In fact, a lot of these are very, very useful in something called UX design. Anybody understand? What does UX stand for? UI is user interface, but you're very close. User experience. So what we want to do when we're creating any kind of application or program is we want to give the user the best experience possible. And the best experience possible for a user is a program that can handle whatever they throw at it without choking. So for example, if you're doing a password where the user has to log in, passwords are almost always case sensitive. But if we want to have a really good user experience, maybe we want to force everything to be lowercase so that if they accidentally throw in a capital there, it's still going to accept it. Or maybe, almost always, we're going to use strip, and not in the exciting way that you might be thinking of. Strip, all it does is take the white space off the end of the beginning and end of input. So if you have a string with a space or a tab or another white space character at the beginning or end of it, it will remove those. And that's a really good thing when you're collecting user input, because a lot of times a user is going to put like space, then their password. And they keep getting angry because they can't log in, or they put space 52. And then your data in your database contains all these extra spaces and extra garbage characters that the users didn't intend to put in there. So you use strip on almost all user input to make sure that those extra random spaces that everybody, and especially the grandmas out there, tend to put in there without thinking about it. And the interesting thing about Python command line programs is that a lot of times you do the input prompt, and I don't know if you noticed this, but the cursor is right there next to it when you use input. Did anybody notice that? I don't know if you're visual people like me, but that bugs me, that cursor is just right there. It feels claustrophobic. So the first thing I want to do before I start typing my input is hit a space so that there's breathing room for whatever I type. But then what I've done is I've introduced a space character to the string that I just input. So using strip gets rid of that. Swap case does just what you think it does. Makes uppercase lower and lowercase upper. Replace and find are very useful. And it works just like the find and replace in a word processor, where you can type a string in, or it takes an argument that's a string and it substitutes for that. We'll look at that in just 1 second here. So here's an example of the strip in action here. So if I have this text string where I have the word banana, but I have a lot of space on the front and back of it, if I take strip and I put that in this sentence here, then it's going to lose all of that white space and it'll just be the word. Simple, but very powerful in terms of what you can use it for. Okay, str.upper and lower. Pretty self-explanatory. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on those. But let's look at some of these. Actually, let's do something else. I'm going to use the input here, not all caps. Input type something. Okay, and now we will do str text dot okay, so now I've got a short program here where I'm getting input from the user, and then I'm stripping the characters, and then I'm printing that variable. Let's take a look at this real quick. Okay, see how that right there? It's just squish, no space, no breathing room. Looks terrible. So all I want to do is hit a space. Let's do a few spaces. Bill was here. Okay, so now if I hit return, what do you see about this right here? What is that? I just ran the strip method on that string. Why is there still space? I told you the answer about 3 minutes ago. Let's see if you can remember. What kind of methods are these? Are they do something or return something? They're return something, right? So that means when I do this, it returns a copy of that string with the spaces removed. But I didn't have a bucket to catch it in, so it just goes away. So if I want this to work, I'm going to have to create a bucket to catch it in called strFixed. And let me print out both of those variables now. Print strFixed. Okay, so I'm going to print both variables, both the original that I input and the fixed one. Let's try it again. Okay, so now you can see this return something needs a bucket to catch it in, and then when I print it, there it looks correct. There's another way to do this that doesn't involve me creating 2 or 3 variables for each thing. And it's a concept called self-assignment. You got to be a little bit careful with it because you don't want to mess yourself up. But this is what self-assignment looks like. Okay, so let's follow through with what I'm doing here. On the first line, I'm getting the input. On the second line, I have strText equals strText.strip. So basically what I'm doing is I'm taking the string out of that container, the strText, doing something to it using that string method, and then I'm returning it back to the same bucket. That's it. That way I'm not creating a whole nother variable out there, because if I had 300 input statements, then I would have 600 variables. It could get crazy really fast if I'm creating multiple variables for each piece of data. I don't really need to do that. So I'm just going to take it out, strip it, and put it back in there. And then when I print just that variable, it works properly. Let's just test my theory here. And I can have lots of space in the middle. And you can see here, let's run it again. Let's put some up front here. Oh well, you get the idea. So if I do this correctly, it'll retain the space in the middle. It'll clean off the spaces at the ends. Okay, and that way I'm only using one variable.